Welcome everyone. Good afternoon, and we would like to welcome a very special guest today, Dr. Neeti Shikha. As you guys know, Dr. Neeti Shikha was the Associate Dean at the Indian School of Public Policy, and it is a huge loss for us that now she is a faculty lecturer at the University of Bradford in London, and we are very happy for you, ma'am, professionally, but personally, it's a loss for us. But because we miss you here back in India. Dr. Neeti Shikha is a life member of the Force Society, parent body of Force School Management, and she also serves on the board of German Bin HTO, a private non-profit international legal and policy advisory and research tank as an expert and a leader. Dr. Neeti Shikha is also the founding board member of the Insolvency Research Foundation, a joint initiative of the industry and government. She has held various academic positions at various law and business schools in India and Singapore. Previously, she was an associate professor at the head international cell at Symbiosis Law School, Noida, and she has been an assistant professor and director at the Center for Corporate and Commercial Laws at the National University Jodhpur, followed by her stint at the Force School of Management and IMT Ghaziabad. She has held various visiting positions at IIM Rohtak and IIFT New Delhi. She's also a trainer and coach for various management development professional programs. Thank you so much, ma'am, for being with us here this evening. Dr. Shikha, so personally for me, I would just give a brief introduction about myself. I'm Shambhavi Singh. I am a part of the third batch of the Indian School of Public Policy, and currently I'm working at the India Cellular and Electronics Association as an assistant manager of public policy. During our batch, Dr. Shikha was the professor for law and policy, and personally for me, she was quite the guiding force since I was the only lawyer in my entire batch, and I don't think anybody understood me better than ma'am herself, dealing because of her own experience dealing on the cusp of law and policy. So, ma'am, first of all, a very warm welcome on behalf of ISPP. And I think we should start with how are you?
Great. Thank you, Shambhavi. Thank you for inviting me. And a very warm welcome to the participants today. Uh, uh, as Shambhavi mentioned that she was the only lawyer in her batch. Thankfully, we have more lawyers in the current batch. Uh, it's very interesting how policy education has not been, interest area for law students, though their interest in policy and politics has remained. And therefore, I feel that it's a great discipline for the lawyers in making. If you remember, Shambhavi, you must have studied in your law school that the Constituent Assembly that was formed to set up the Constitution of India was primarily of lawyers. If you look at the US and the UK, lawyers literally dominate the parliament. So policy making has always been the forte of lawyers. But in India, over time, lawyers have lost their interest in space in this area. So I'm happy that Shambhavi has been a great lawyer, now working at the intersections of law and policy. And also we have more lawyers this batch. I'm not sure how many of you here are lawyers. So hoping that, both of us can add some value to you. To the question how I have been, being in the UK is interesting, especially given the political, instability that country is going through and the economic instability. But having said that, truly enjoying my work and life here. I miss ISPP, but to let all of you know that I'm still very much part of the family, and happy to have a conversation on law and policy with you, Shambhavi.
Absolutely, ma'am. It's our pleasure. And since you already started with the conversation about the intersections of law and policy, I would further ask you to continue on that forum and just elaborate a little bit on how lawyers can contribute towards the policy sector in India, and also a lot of law students and lawyers, practicing professionals, they do ask me that is getting a policy degree important for a lawyer in case they want to switch over to the field of policy? So, if you could give your insight on the same.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Shambhavi. Uh, you asked two questions primarily. Firstly, whether lawyers really have a role in policy field, and if yes, what's the future like for them? And second question is that if they do have a future there, should they go for a formal degree? Uh, Now, to answer your first question first, I strongly believe that lawyers can play a vital role in policy making. Uh, this era in India has been dominated mostly by economists, and rightly so, because every law or regulation that you bring in a country, you have to look at the economic, it has an economic ramification for the state, for the government, and hence economists can really weigh, they can help design the policy, placing the right incentives. But if you leave it only to the economist, I think you're only moving towards the disaster. Because in the end of the day, every policy that you bring in, or every law or regulation that you bring in, it has to see the light of the day and has to stand the test of courts. And it's very important to understand the laws that you bring in does stand the test of courts. Giving example of GST when it was introduced, and IBC, an era where I worked relentlessly for last 5 years. Both of the laws were challenged in the court, in the Supreme Court. The constitutional validity was challenged because it did, affect the federal structure of the country. You look at IBC, the law provided the home buyers equal status of financial creditors. That was also challenged in the court of law initially on basis of Article 14, 21. But at that point in time, courts, they said it's constitutionally valid for both the laws. But the point I'm trying to make here is that probably a lot of time and a lot of efforts would have been saved. And if you had some good lawyers preempting as to what the challenges to a policy or law could be, and then you design a policy, prepare yourself for challenge so that you don't waste time in these issues, or rather focus on the good implementation of law. Now, the second question that you asked me, that is policy education important for lawyers? I have been working in the policy space, especially in the insolvency space, for a long time. Just to let you know that I was the founding head for the Center for Insolvency and Bankruptcy that was set up by the Ministry of Corporate Affairs at the ISEA, and they had a lot of opportunities to give policy inputs to the government of India. And I'm really happy to see that many of the policy inputs that I gave, it is being implemented in phases. But I must say that a lot of information or knowledge that I had was over the years interacting with my economist friends and reading economics by myself. I still strongly believe that if I had a chance to probably join an institute like ISPP, what the work that I would have done would have been truly remarkable. I had done some very good work, but I had to put a lot of effort and time in learning. I'll give you an example. Whenever you talk about policy, design, you think about what population are you going to implement at. You look at whether the data supports your thoughts and findings. You're not being guided by whims and fancies, but you're guided by reality. And for that, you need to understand what data speaks. You need to do some research. Sadly, in India, the multidisciplinary education is really not there. So you not see a lawyer who is really equipped at carrying out those types of studies, using data or stats to make an argument, to make a very cogent argument. But at the same time, in some fields like banking, finance, even in the field of designing social benefit programs for people, you need to have the data speak with you. Now, what does a formal education do? It helps you inculcate those skills and makes you a better policy professional. So, and the best part about lawyers joining this field is that most of the law schools do train you very well in critical thinking, and that is the one of the strongest USPs for lawyers. Now, if the critical thinking is, it marries the scientific approach that policy professionals take towards in designing a policy, I think that's the recipe for a good governance, a good society, a good policy.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Your insights were extremely helpful. And also, ma'am, I would like to add that I very well resonate with what you just spoke about, because so currently, since I'm working in an association, on at the forefront of it, I can see how important it is for the stakeholders' opinion or the lawyer's opinion to get to the government in order to say form a new bill or a policy or any new law for that matter. And the stakeholders approach can only and only be translated by a lawyer. It's very hard for other people to understand the kind of critical thinking that requires, or even the drafting skills that are required for one. So I absolutely understand your approach regarding that. And building on to the same thing, ma'am, so it's a little bit different from what you have previously dealt with, but this is a selfish question for me personally. I would like to know your insights a little bit, if you could touch up upon the telecom bill that has been proposed in the parliament, not in the parliament, but it's been introduced amongst the stakeholders, and it's open for comments actually right now. And the Indian government says that it will be a game changer in the space of data privacy and telecom per se, and it is so it will be replacing quite obsolete laws which had been in existence since the 1800s actually. So if you could elaborate a little bit on that, and what do you think, if will this be a positive approach for the government, or how will the policy space look like once this comes into the realm?
Yeah. Thank you, Shambhavi. Now, that question, you have really taken me by surprise, but thank you for that question. I am watching the policy space, the legal space in India very closely. And also because most of my work is comparative, looking at the UK laws and Indian laws. Telecom bill, I think the way people are looking at it as a game changer, especially because it introduces 5G, which takes India to the next level of technological advancement. And it also it is allegedly it said that there will be huge generation of employment. If you look at the government's performance in the last few years, employment generation has been one of the weak link in the policy design. So it's assumed that this bill, when it sees the light of the day, there'll be a lot of jobs created, and I do resonate the claims that government makes to a large extent. But if I look at it as a lawyer, as an independent thinker, there are a few things that has taken me by surprise. There's one exercise that all of you could do looking at the bill. Just download the bill and do a word search of public interest. There'll be 40 hits on public interest. Now, public interest, I mean, we lawyers know about it. It's one of the most unruly horse. You cannot tame it because it's such a subjective nature. And what is public interest is always open to questions and debates by the courts. Now, while at one side, the telecom bill does some great stuff like, it eases the spectrum allocation by doing away with redundant bureaucratic way of going through licensing, open licensing, etc. It says government can do away with that if it finds it fit in the public interest. It also says under Section 3 that assignment of spectrum could be done by just nomination, not necessarily by licensing, which has been in questions. in past. One good thing it does is it brings a lot of OTT platforms which are, surpassing the surveillance of law today under its ambit. Now, the question that, I was asking myself, and you young people should ask yourself, is that it's good that we are doing away with the bureaucratic redundant processes of, allocating the spectrum. We are doing away with, the procedural hurdles. But from a legal standpoint, justice should not just be seen, governance should not just be seen, it should be deemed to be seen, in the sense that the procedures have to be as fair as the law itself. Now, if you give so much of power to a state to decide to do away with licensing, to do away with, of course, licensing has been subject to high criticism, and that's a separate debate. But doing away with the fair process of allocation, then you're just giving too much power to a state to take those sort of decisions. Now, we all know that, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So this kind of power that Section 3 of the proposed telecom bill gives to the state, it has scope for huge, exploitation and huge corruption. Now, it will be very important to watch this space and see that how government restores trust in people while exercising this sort of exception. So that's important. And I feel that in a democratic country like ours, things must be very transparent. And government should the government process should be very transparent so that nobody can raise a broader question on the government's dealing, which is not there as the bill stands today. Now, another important aspect that got my attention was the power that government has in quote public interest to suspend, the access to internet, to suspend access to telecom, and even to call for surveillance. In past, there has been huge debate how governments have been, some democratic countries have put their citizens into surveillance. It goes to the very, the fundamentals of right to privacy, right to access to internet. All this has become as integral part of Article 21. And I feel that the power that the government is holding within the bill as it stands today has huge threat to the right of life, which envisages right to access to internet, right to privacy, by exercising its power in so-called public interest. For two folds, firstly, government decides as to when to exercise that power, and what is public interest itself is very, very subjective. So I think these two things should really send a warning signal to citizens at large that no state, I would say no state should have that kind of absolute power to do that.
Absolutely, ma'am. Thank you so much. And that does provide me, selfishly speaking, but that does provide me quite an insight to on the implications of what could be as a part of telecom bill. So, because most of us, when we look at it from an overall perspective, from a broad spectrum, it seems to be lending itself into the realm of EODB, but perhaps it might come with its own cost. So, thank you so much for that. And ma'am, as you had earlier mentioned that you have also worked as the head for the Center for Insolvency and Bankruptcy at the IICAs. And talking about the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, which has been your, you are a legend in that domain, to say the least. And it has been in the realm for the longest time. So, ma'am and I have also written a paper together on the culmination of law and policy, and how behavioral economics actually might play a part as a nudge to for the creditors to perform better within the spectrum of IBC. So, ma'am, if you could elaborate a little bit on the insolvency bankruptcy code and what probably the lessons that the world could take from India regarding that section.
Yeah. Thank you, Shambhavi. Thank you for reminding me of the work that we did together. Just for the sake of the audience, that one more thing that you learn and you do at ISPP, if you join, is that you get to work with professors, you advance your research interest and skills. So Shambhavi and I, along with other ISPP alumni now, we worked on the, on evidencing how nudge, a tool of behavioral economics, helped IBC attain its objective. And through data, we tried to prove that when the threshold to file for bankruptcy was 1 lakh rupee, it did play a role in nudging people to settle their claims, as against when the when the threshold was extended to 1 crore as it stands today. So thank you for reminding me. I think that Shambhavi, IBC has been truly commendable piece of legislation that has been brought by the current government. And I say so because it is a truly market-centric reform that India envisaged, it embraced. People say that India attained liberalization in 1992. I somehow, personally do not agree with that. I feel that the true liberalization happened only with the coming of IBC. And I say so because despite having liberalized your market in 1990s, the laws were still very, conservative. It did not allow free flow of, funds in India. And most importantly, what it did not allow was, it did not allow market to do the course correction. Now, what IBC does is it allows market to do the course correction. Now, just building onto that, what IBC does is, in case of failing firm, should somebody come and bid to take it over to turn it around, or should the companies be allowed to fail? Now, that kind of decision was left to the market alone to decide, which is truly spectacular. And I think it's the game changer for the Indian economy. Now, having said that, I feel that IBC had a lot of teething issues in the beginning. For example, the time that was prescribed to resolve a company's insolvency, it was initially about 180 days, went to 220 days, and so on and so forth. It still has not been able to really meet this objective of timely resolution. Now, having said that, one has to be mindful as to where you're coming from. We're coming from a BIFR regime where the average time taken to resolve insolvency was, more than, 5 years. That's what the Banking Law Reform Committee mentions. It has been considerably reduced, even if there's a delay within the IBC process. Most importantly, insolvency is not being seen as a shame. There's a lot of scope for companies to start up and to fail. You don't see failure as a shame. Your company's not doing well. Look at Byju's today. It is it's not doing well. There's somebody who will take it over, and it's a win-win situation for all the stakeholders because the jobs are saved, the company's saved, the patents are still being used by other companies, and you can commercialize it and so on and so forth. I know it's a long debate. I can go on and on. No. However, recently I've been arguing that the problem with the policy side of IBC is that, the policy amendments in IBC has taken us 1 step forward and 10 steps backward. And that is probably because we still are not very comfortable with ourselves in taking very bold measures. I remember when pre-pack was being introduced, and I had given a presentation to the Secretary MCA, and I had argued before Secretary Sir that why do we need to only give it to MSMEs? MSMEs cannot take benefit of pre-packs, it should be given to corporates. Now, finally, the government is considering, after so many years, let's see how much time we have lost. And the rationale they gave was that, let's do a pilot with small companies and see how it goes. We were not very sure about taking this bold measure for the big companies. Another example I'll give you was that, look at the success fee. One of the, allegation, and I mean, the hearsay is that IBC is making people, it helps promoters and people to make money and the company that loses. अगर मैं हिंदी में बोल सकूं तो बोलते हैं कि IPs पैसे बनाते हैं but companies तो डूबती रहती है. People were not, they were exploiting the IBC process. Now, one way out to cure this malaise was कि you align the incentives right. आप IPs को बोलिए कि भाई अगर आप successfully turn around a company तो आपको ज्यादा पैसे मिलेंगे, पर अगर आप success नहीं पाते हो तो you'll not get what. And that was like a win-win situation for the company, the corporate debtor, IPs, and all the stakeholders, COC, everybody. But for some reasons, I'm not going to, वो नहीं लाया गया, अब उसको लाया जा रहा है. तीसरी चीज थी कि हम लिमिट कर दिए कि IPs कितनी assignments ले सकते हैं. Probably we didn't want some IPs to grow too rich and others not. We're very socialist in our mind. We want everybody to have a share of pie. No, in a market-centric economy, it cannot happen. People will, but at the same time, opportunities keep growing. पर वो जो हमारी रूढ़िवादिता थी, which is guided by the very socialist approach that having welfare, and social measures for giving equal opportunity to all, it took us several steps backward by limiting the number of. अभी वो in a bid to attract investors, अभी हम IPE लाने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं. We're allowing IPEs to now become the IPs, professionals. हमने देखा है कि corporate governance का क्या status है इंडिया में. There's very less transparency, very less accountability. और अब IPs के ला रहे हैं तो अब IPEs को पहले IPs बना देंगे, फिर हम policy बनाएंगे कि corporate governance framework कैसे होना चाहिए. So, in nutshell, what I'd like to say is that we need to think very holistically about a policy. We should not make amendments or policies in retrospect, guided by our previous whims and fancies. We have to make it truly market-centric. Or I strongly believe that ISPP के जो बच्चे निकलेंगे पढ़ करके, they will be able to think like that. So if future of India has to be good, there have to be more people who are studying from institutions like ISPP, because यहाँ पे आप एक lawyer, एक engineer, एक accountant, एक economist, they all come together and think about an issue. And उससे जो निकल के आता है, I mean, that's truly marvelous. And you can cure a lot of issues that you face in policy making if you can think holistically about an issue. So, yes. Shambhavi, there are some hands being raised in attendees, so I'll leave it to you if you want to take it right now. Or other come attendees here, so maybe we can just allow them to unmute themselves and speak.
Ma'am, I think we'll have to, I don't see an issue in taking questions right now, but probably we'll have to include them as panelists. If that's a possibility, Sagar, if we can join the meeting.
So you can promote them. Yeah.
I'm sorry?
To be all the members, because there are only 8 attendees.
Only attendees who are raising hands can be promoted,
so,
I guess.
There's one attendee who's raised their hand. I'll just
Sure.
unmute them. Yeah, you can go ahead with your question. So. Oh, okay. I think they have already typed their question in the chat box. I'll just read it out. How can we expect justice in the present scenario in India?
Ms. Shafi, you've asked a question which is very broad. I'm not sure in what context, but if just to throw some light, you raised your hand. So if you could just clarify your question, please go ahead.
One minute.
Ji.
1 minute, ma'am.
in the meantime, let me share something with the audience that ISP Filhal, I mean, there are many courses that it does for some for young professionals, some for executives. But दो जो हमारा flagship program है, एक तो 1 साल का है, which is called Policy Design and Management, and PDM, admission जिसकी I think December में शुरू होती है. दूसरा है लोक नीति, which is a short course. It is a hybrid course, synchronous as well as asynchronous, और 4 महीने का course है. Largely it is online, but आप 2 बार आपको face to face मिलना पड़ता है. And the beauty of PDM is that you get be taught by the best of the policy minds in the country. और जो लोक नीति की जो USP है वो है कि like बोलचाल की भाषा में, you can use any language, English, Hindi, English, to learn, and it helps you simplify, the policy technicalities into simple language and helps you really scale up your career. Or देखा गया in past few years that for Lok Niti, mostly professionals have joined the courses, and PDM it's more competitive to get into PDM. It's highly competitive. You have an entrance exam, you've got to qualify that, and then you can come for the policy immersion day, on which we look at how you think about a policy. So दोनों programs हैं. In case आप जाना चाहेंगे, then you can write to the mission office. Shafi ji, is it possible for you to speak now?
I think now it is too late.
No, in democracy, it's never too late, I would say.
No, I can understand.
So just to throw some light. Yes.
अगली बार करेंगे मैडम इस पे बात.
No worries, though.
Okay.
What Mr. Shafi is asking about, how do we see justice in India? I mean, these are very.
Building on to that only, like if you could explain. Or even though in your previous answer you did elaborate on this, but like in a nutshell, if you could explain how has probably IBC accelerated this process of the term justice. Now the term justice is obviously it can be interpreted in any way or form by the likes of the common man in India, but how has IBC helped, say, the common man or the companies are being prevented from being immediately liquidated? If you could elaborate a little. I know it doesn't have a lot of criminal context to it, but just a little bit on that side.
I mean, just before that, let me just share with you today, I was watching this great debate by Baba Bhimrao Ambedkar in the parliament. And one thing that he said in the parliament that really caught my attention was that he said that I'm not worried about future of India. I'm worried about the present plurality in India and how it is. And that was very amazing because, when there's a rule of law, future to aapka acha hoga hi, but what you need to do is how do you meet the present challenges? And I'll come to your questions on IBC later, but just, recently hijab judgment had come and I was reading the judgment. It is such a strong but balanced judgment. और उसमें कुछ चीजें मैंने देखी which really I was reading the order and I realized that a couple of things that is very interesting and it is open to debate, to be honest. It's not something which has a concrete answer. Was, how do you look at secular India? What do you mean by a secular India? So in the judgment, they gave reference to Panth Nirapeksh, in a sense that you are not Dharm Nirapeksh, but Panth Nirapeksh. I mean, in the beginning, the judgment goes on to say, the state should not differentiate you based on the religion, but Dharma is something. Dharma is more than religion. It's about the values of life, which a state can, of course, look into preserving that. Now, I'm not sure if Shafiji was referring to that how do you see justice? I think the answer to his question very briefly would be that it is in the power of people. Power of people to choose, part of people to take part in democratic discussions, power to at least speak your dissent, and so on and so forth. I had read it somewhere that a journalist, a काफी noted journalist, ने कहा कि I talk about issues not because they're very critical, or to win a war, but I say because somebody has to say things about it. So just to answer briefly, Shafiji, I'm not sure what you were intending to say, but it's important that you speak and you participate in public discussion, policy discussion. Now, building up on, you said that, looking at justice system in the current scenario. See, justice is at the heart of every legal process, every legal document. It is the spirit of the Constitution. And that is the reason why you see that though you feel that government has, in some policies, has not done something to, which is a call for justice, for example, treating home buyers, giving example of IVC as financial creditors. That's not what, that's not right. If you look at very truly legally perspective, it's not right. It's not correct. But to do justice to home buyers, to do justice to the middle classes, put money, in infrastructure, hoping that the project will, yield them their dream house. They did treat them as financial. इनको वो दर्जा दे दिया गया financial creditors का initial years में. So this is what justice is. That sometimes leaving the complete positive aspect of law aside, you create and carve exceptions to embrace, to address the inequalities and embrace differences. Now, that I would say is, is justice.
Thank you so much. That was a very, very insightful answer. Ma'am, just a little bit on the IVC side, I would just like to ask you, this is not a very technical question, just a general broad-based question, I would want your opinion on. They say that investors are scared of investing in a market like India because, and I'm talking about Indian investors per se, because they don't have the risk-taking mindset because of the whole social judgment that is associated with that, and failure is not encouraged in business, which I've heard an investor talking about the fact that if you play safe in business, what's the point of being in business? You should rather invest in stock market. So if you could just give your opinion regarding that a little bit.
Yeah. Thank you, Shambhavi. Thank you for, that's something that is very important that people talk about today. India, it did away with right to property. And since then, and even before that, businesses were always seen with the eyes of suspicion. And again, our efforts to create a more egalitarian society. We didn't want somebody to grow too rich, and we wanted that social inequality gets bridged up. But if you look at the past few years' data, has it really achieved its purpose? The answer is no. I always say that India's GDP is doing very well, but on the social indices, India's not doing well. So India is growing richer, but not Indians. That's what I always claim and maintain, especially after coming to Britain. People were mocking, saying that your British economy is doing very bad. But I must say that here, the kind of welfare schemes this capitalist country has is amazing, in a sense that everybody has a house. Everybody has access to education. There's no bureaucratic process involved there's no government involved in your daily lives, I may say. So ever since I got my, I arrived, I've not interacted with any government agency except for paying my council tax, etc. But that's not the case in India, Now, the larger question that we ask ourselves is that why the risk appetite in India is lower? It's simple reason, because businesses are not seen with the eyes of trust. Businesses are scared to invest in India. If you look at, Land Acquisition Act, which of course, that was exploited, but I still remember the drama that happened that one MP had to tear it away and say it's not what we want, because we wanted to make it more welfare driven. Now, ask your question today, at least people living in Delhi, that had government had not exercised its power under urgency clause, exercising its eminent domain powers, metros would not have seen light of the day. As a young researcher, I was researching the DMRC and looking at the cases of all the land acquisition under Section 17. Now, in the erstwhile Land Acquisition Act, the state had the power to acquire land only thing you could question was the quantum of compensation, not the purpose of compensation. And it did yield you some good by giving you Delhi Metro today. Of course, there have been some bad examples also where, some businesses have been favored by a party over the other. Now, I don't have a clear-cut answer as to what is the best way forward, but I think one simple way that government can sort of, cure that problem, that businesses increase their risk-taking appetite, was government getting out of business. Now, how does government get itself out of business? Firstly, government should not compete in the same line of business where private players are competing. Now, imagine it's energy sector and you have government companies and you have private companies. Now, government is making regulations for both these companies. I mean, there's a plethora of examples how government companies get favored. They're not doing well, but still they're giving a leeway. Companies Act, you look at women director. How many government companies have women? I mean, now, of course, the data show that they have it, but when it became a mandate, and you look at the Companies Act, there's so many leeways carved out for government undertakings and companies. The corporate governance structure, in number of independent directors in the government companies, while, it is mandated that the private listed companies have, but, for the government companies, it's not the same level of governance that we have. I can give you examples in various sectors. So one way would be that government should get itself out of business and let the private players play. That's one. So that there's no apparent bias that we see in favor of a government company. That's second thing I think the government should do is it should ease the compliances to do businesses. Now, the problem would be if government holds the rights in its own, holds the right to give favors or make the subjective decisions. But if government could create a platform where everybody can compete with itself and the process is transparent, I think a lot of issues will get solved. Now, I'll give you an example that government has done in the past, which is commendable. For example, they were the OTT platform that government created through e-marketplace for the government. Now, that has been wonderful because even small, players could register themselves to that e-marketplace and they can compete with the big players and they can offer their competitive pricing. So to answer your question in nutshell, firstly, the government should limit itself, not do businesses. It should make the rules of the game in a very fair manner. There should be more transparency in the government process. The license Raj, we are still living in the license Raj in one way or the other. This whole regulatory cholesterol for the businesses have to be done away with. The premise should be trust and not distrust. So to say, so many compliances a companies have to do. The premise should be trust, that you assume that companies do it. If they don't do it, then you punish them. And most importantly, Shambhavi, you as a lawyer would feel that there must be rule of law. Look at the fate of contract enforcement in the country. It's a shame that people cannot honor their contractual promises. There's so many evidences needed. Everything has to be used in writing. And despite all that, you go to fight and you lose years in courts enforcing a contract. So rule of law, easing the compliances. It'll take a hell lot of things to hold the trust of business, I would say.
Absolutely, ma'am. Thank you so much. That was extremely insightful. So, ma'am, since we don't have a lot of time left, I would just like to ask you one last question. And again, this comes from a more deep personal space rather than anything else. So, I have ventured into the field of tech policy, and we have been going to some of these corporate events wherein out of all the people in the room, I can just see a handful of, say, 4 or 5 women in the entire room, and that's about it. And they're the same women that are present at every such event. And you have conquered the IBC space, and you work in a male-dominated industry essentially, and you've carved out a niche for yourself. So I just wanted to know, ma'am, how can we encourage more and more women participation in this field, and why is it important for women to be encouraged more in the policy sector? Because somehow I have been facing this issue that everywhere I go, people just assume that I'm a part of the public relations team or the media team, and I have to clarify, no, I am working in policy. So
Policy.
yes,
I'm a
ma'am,
serious policy professional, right?
yes, yes, absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
You know, Shambhavi, interestingly, on this Wednesday, we are having a discussion in our Career Boost Week where I'm on a panel with women that break the law, and we're discussing exactly the same thing, that how to encourage women participation, how women perform in this field of law. You've asked me in the field of policy, which is the presence is still lesser. There have been at least some conspicuous number rising in the legal field, but not so much in the policy field. Now, let me first tell you that it is important that women are in policy making. It's such a shame that all the women-centric laws in this country are made by a male-dominated panel. What a shame. Of course, they will never say menstrual leave is important because they don't know how it feels like. Of course, they would say that, oh, young creche is okay, we can just partner, but they'll not look into the workability. So there's a lot of box ticking. Even when they're policy, there's box ticking because they don't know how it feels to be a woman. So is gender diversity important? Is it important to have women in the field? The answer is certainly yes. And let me tell my audience that at ISPP, I'm told that there are more women than men who study. So the times are here to change in future. For me, it was not easy. It was very, very difficult to work. I still remember I went back to work when my daughter was just 6 months. And it was thanks to the great leadership that I had wherever I worked, either the director of Symbiosis, who allowed me flexible hours. I owe a lot to Louis Miranda, who's the chairman of ISPP, because I remember in my early days of being a young mother, but now my daughter is 6 years, Louis would always say, oh, bring your daughter in, but don't hold yourself back just because you're a mother. Now, how many men like Louis exist in this country? I'm not sure, who would encourage women to come and participate equally. But what women have to do is, firstly, they have to rise up to the challenge. They have to rise up to the challenge and say, oh dear, I'm going to go and work. At the same time, women folk have to show the kind of commitment. Somewhere the industry has perceived that women who are mothers, or in general, they are a little less serious about their work. So if you expect, professionalism from a male, you expect the same standards of professionalism from a woman. And I must say that born to a woman, who was a workaholic, my mother, I was, I got a lot of things. I learned a lot of things from her. I remember in my law school days when I would go for a holiday at home, I'm from Patna, and mom would say, you can come and visit me in my office, beta, but I'm not free before 4 o'clock because I'm at work. And she was head of the institution. She would have just taken a lunch break and come and see. She said, no, मैं office में हूँ, आप आके मुझसे मिल लीजिए. Bring your books here, study with me, but I'm not coming. So that kind of professionalism, if the commitment requires, ideally nobody should work on the weekend, but if commitment requires, you show same kind of commitment. Now, having said that, not every woman is fortunate to do that. So I think every organization in its own right has to rise up to the challenge. It is a cost. Let me tell you, for organizations and companies, it's a cost. A man is ready to work for 16 hours sitting in his office, but for that work, probably you need 2 women because वो 8 घंटे ज़्यादा काम नहीं कर सकती. So for organizations, it's a cost, but probably they have to look at the long-term future, because all said and done, the real diverse culture that you build up around an organization helps. I mean, it has been proven, in so many research that it leads to higher profitability of an organization, and more than profitability, sustainability of an organization. So yes, today we see one Shambhavi in a discussion. Hopefully, there'll be 110 Shambhavis in such forums. It's not an easy, it's an uphill climb for all of us, but hopefully soon we'll be there.
Thank you so much, ma'am. That was extremely, extremely insightful. I personally learned a lot. I mean, you did mention that there are more women studying in ISPP as compared to men. However, and I consider it my good fortune to be a part of the institution, but we just had one female faculty member during our time. Right? Everybody was a man.
Hopefully we'll have more. Yeah. Hopefully we'll be a man. More, yeah.
I really hope to see that day soon. And thank you so much, ma'am. This has been an extremely insightful session. It's been my privilege to have you back here in this beautiful space that has been a ray of sunshine in my life, to say the least. I know I'm saying all these poetic words, but I really mean it from the depth of my heart. ISPP as an institute itself has really helped me carve out a niche for myself, carve out a career, and personally and professionally, of course, I have a special bond with Dr. Shikha because she's been there through and through. So that I think that's the magic of this institution. The way faculty members as well as the scholars bond here, I have never seen that anywhere else. And I would also especially like to mention this one factor, that the student to teacher ratio that was present here and the amount of time that the faculty members were ready to give us, never seen that anywhere else in an Indian institute at least. So it's been a privilege, it's been an absolute privilege, ma'am. Thank you so much for your time, and so sorry to disturb you on a Saturday.
Not at all, not at all. I wish all the best to our audience, and in case you have any more questions about what ISPP is like, feel free to write to the admission office. You could even reach to me directly. I must let you all know that even before the ISPP logo was designed, I was part of the discussion with the founders, because I always say that ISPP is just not an institution. It's a vision to create a more equal society through getting the best public policy experts. And hence, it'll be great if you think and you decide to apply. Feel free to reach out to any one of us. And Shambhavi, I'm so proud of what you're doing today, and I wish you all the best future. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, ma'am. It's been an absolute honor, and thank you so much to Sagar and the ISPP admissions team and everybody else for joining us. Hope to see you guys soon again, and it's been a privilege. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shikha. Thank you, Shambhavi. Have a great evening.